Hello, hi students. I hope you all are doing well. So I welcome you all to the last part of this video series of chapter Reproduction in Plants. So today we are going to discuss the question answers for this chapter. So let's start with the exercise question. Question number 1, fill in the blanks. A. Production of new individuals from the vegetative part of the plant is called dash. सो हमने पढ़ा था कि प्लांट्स के वेजिटेटिव पार्ट्स होते हैं. कौन कौन से पार्ट्स होते हैं वेजिटेटिव? इट इज स्टेम्स, रूट्स एंड लीव्स. सो जब भी प्लांट्स इन पार्ट्स के साथ रिप्रोड्यूस करेंगे, अपने वेजिटेटिव पार्ट्स के मदद से रिप्रोड्यूस करेंगे टू प्रोड्यूस अ न्यू इंडिविजुअल, इस प्रोसेस को कहते हैं वेजिटेटिव प्रोपोगेशन. Let's move on to the question B. A flower may have either male or female reproductive parts. Such a flower is called dash. Now we have learned that there are two types of flowers. एक flower में सिर्फ male या female reproductive part होते हैं और एक flower में दोनों reproductive parts present होते हैं. So वो flower जिसमें या तो male या female reproductive part present हो is called as unisexual flower. ओके, यूनि मतलब वन. तो कोई भी एक रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट प्रेजेंट होगा, या तो मेल या तो फीमेल. लेट्स मूव ऑन टू द थर्ड क्वेश्चन. क्वेश्चन सी. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same or the another flower of the same kind is known as dash. So whenever there is a transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or to another flower of the same kind, this process of transferring the pollen grain is called as pollination. Question number D. The fusion of male and female gamete is termed as fertilization. मेल और फीमेल गैमेट फ्यूज होंगे टू फॉर्म जाइगोट और इस प्रोसेस को कहते हैं फर्टिलाइजेशन. द लास्ट क्वेश्चन E. Seed dispersal takes place by the means of dash, dash and dash. So seed disperse होते हैं from the parent body to various new places by the means of water, wind and animal. या तो वो wind से blow away हो जाएंगे दूर दूर places में, या तो water के through वो float करेंगे to new places, or they will stick to the body of animals and they will reach new places. So now let's move on to question number 2. Question number 2. Describe the different methods of asexual reproduction. Give examples. So if you all remember, asexual reproduction वो type का reproduction है जिसमें एक parent involve होते हैं. There is an involvement of one parent and जो individual produce होंगे वो exact copy होंगे अपने parent के. So there are different methods of asexual reproduction. सबसे पहले है vegetative propagation. ये method use होता है by plants. So it is a type of a asexual reproduction in which new plants are produced from roots, stems and leaves. So these parts of the plant are called as vegetative parts. So whenever plants will use their vegetative parts in order to reproduce, it will be called as vegetative propagation. Next method is budding. So there are some organisms like hydra, yeast, जिनके body में एक bud develop होता है as an outgrowth at a specific site. Okay, so if I'll draw an yeast, ये yeast cell है, ये cell में एक outgrowth present होगा. This is called as bud. Okay, एक specific site में एक outgrowth होगा, which is called as bud, and this bud will keep on growing. And once it is mature, it will develop into new individual. और ये parent yeast से detach हो जाते हैं. Okay, so these buds will develop into new individual when fully mature. And they detach from the parent's body and become independent individual. Let's move on to the third method of asexual reproduction, that is fragmentation. Now, there are organisms like algae, which is also known as Spirogyra. They live in aquatic environment. And जैसे ही उन्हें water और nutrient मिलता है, वो बहुत ही rapidly grow करते हैं. So they are somewhat cylindrical in structure, ribbon-like. Now, they will break their body into pieces pieces is also called as fragments, right? So इनके body fragments में break होंगे 2 या उससे भी ज्यादा fragments में, और ये हर एक fragment develop करेगा into new individual. Okay, so when water and nutrients are available, algae grow and multiply rapidly and break into 2 or more fragments. And these fragments or pieces will grow into new individuals. And the last method of asexual reproduction is spore formation. अब ये जो spores होते हैं, they are present in fungi and they are asexual reproductive bodies. इनका एक हार्ड कवरिंग होता है ताकि वो अनफेवरेबल कंडीशंस को बर्दाश्त कर सके. नाउ अनफेवरेबल कंडीशन मींस हाई टेम्परेचर एंड लो ह्यूमिडिटी. So because of this hard covering, they can tolerate unfavorable conditions. So जैसे ही उन्हें favorable condition मिलेगा, ये spore germinate करते हैं and they will develop into new individual. Question number 3, explain what do you understand by sexual reproduction? So सबसे पहले sexual reproduction में what you all have to remember is इस method में 2 individual involve होते हैं. So there will be a male which will produce male gamete and there will be a female who will produce female gamete. And they both are going to be involved in the formation of, both the gametes are going to be involved in the formation of zygote. So when a male gamete and a female gamete are involved in reproduction, this method is called as sexual reproduction. And in this method, the male and the female gamete, they will fuse together. They will come together during the process of fertilization in order to form a zygote. ये 2 cell मिलके एक single cell बनाएंगे, which is called as zygote. Question 4, state the main differences between asexual and sexual reproduction. So let's look at the differences between these 2 types of reproduction. So as I have already mentioned, A means 1. Okay, so वो reproduction जिसमें सिर्फ एक parent involve हो is called as asexual reproduction. On the other hand, in sexual reproduction, there are involvement of 2 parents. There should be a male producing male gamete and there should be a female producing female gamete. Next, asexual reproduction में there is no formation and fusion of gametes. ना ही gametes form होते हैं और ना ही gametes fuse होते हैं. But in sexual reproduction, male gamete produce कर रहे हैं, female gamete produce कर रहे हैं. And ये 2 gametes fuse करेंगे and it will result in the formation of zygote. Okay, so zygote is formed in sexual reproduction. Now, if we talk about plants, asexual method mein there is no requirement of seed, but sexual reproduction in plants, seed is required so that flowers can be formed. Asexual reproduction में जो offspring produce हुए, offspring मतलब young ones. So asexual reproductions में जो offspring produce होते हैं, they are identical to the parents. They are exact copy of their parents. But sexual reproduction में ऐसा नहीं होता है. They are not identical to their parent. And lastly, let's look at some examples of the organisms which undergo these kind of reproduction. So yeast, rose, tomato, jasmine, all these are different organisms which will undergo asexual mode of reproduction. And the example for sexual reproduction are hibiscus, corn, papaya, humans. Okay, we all undergo sexual mode of reproduction. Question 5, sketch the reproductive parts of flower. So this is a flower. Particularly, if we talk about this flower, this is China rose, which is also called as hibiscus. हमें discuss करना है इनका reproductive part. So plants are having a male reproductive part, which is this part. Okay, so ये जो part है, इससे हम कहते हैं anther. This is called as anther. And ये produce करते हैं pollen grains. And pollen grains produce करेंगे male gametes. Okay, so ये जो anther है, इन्हें hold करते हैं ये tube-like structure which is called as filament. Okay, so the male reproductive part of the flower will consist of anther along with filament. Now, let's look at the female reproductive part. It consists of three important parts. The first part is the stigma. Okay, it's the place where pollen grains are going to land, where pollination is going to occur. Then there will be development of pollen tubes and finally fertilization. And this long tube, ये जो tube like structure है, this is called as style. And ये जो swollen structure है, इसे कहते हैं ovary. And ovary के अंदर present होते हैं ovules. Ovules will have female gamete. Okay, so what are the different parts of female reproductive parts of the plant? So it consists of stigma, the sticky part where the pollen grains will land. It will consist of style, जहाँ पे pollen tube develop होंगे, and ovary, जहाँ पे male और female gamete fuse होंगे in order to fertilize. Question 6. Explain the differences between self-pollination and cross-pollination. So we know that there are two types of pollination, self and cross-pollination. Let's differentiate them. So in self-pollination, there will be transfer of pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of the same flower. एक ही flower से anther और stigma में जब pollen grain transfer होता है, that is self-pollination. But cross-pollination में ये जो pollen grains है, ये transfer होंगे between two different flowers in two different plants. Okay, so it involves the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of different flowers. Self-pollination में limited amount में pollen grains produce होते हैं, but cross-pollination में large amount में pollen grains produce होते हैं. Now there is a reason behind it. Self-pollination में surety होता है कि pollination आराम से हो जाएगा, but cross-pollination बहुत ही ज़्यादा dependent है on pollinating factors. वो dependent है wind पर, insects पर, animals पे, ताकि वो pollen grains को carry कर पाए दूसरे flowers तक. And that is the reason why large amount of pollen grains are produced for cross-pollination. Next, in self-pollination, pollen grains are directly transferred into flower stigma. But as I have told you all, cross-pollination में the pollen grain has to be carried away, either by wind or insects, animals or water. So there has to be a pollinating agent. All these factors which helps in pollination is called as pollinating agents. So cross-pollination में pollinating agents are required. And lastly, self-pollination में there is no need of pollinators, that is pollinating agents. But in cross-pollination, they require pollinators for the transfer of pollen grains. Question 7. How does the process of fertilization takes place in flowers? So let us understand this with the help of a diagram. So suppose this is the stigma, this is the style, and this is the ovary. Now ovary is having ovule inside it. So जैसे ही pollen grain land करते हैं stigma में, इन बहुत सारे pollen grain में से एक ही pollen grain develop कर पाता है pollen tube. Okay, अब ये pollen tube में male gamete present है. Now this pollen tube will develop and it will travel all the way down to the ovary. Okay, ये पूरे style में develop होते होते ovary तक पहुंचते हैं. And यहाँ पे male gamete है और ovary के अंदर female gamete है. There will be a fusion of male and female gamete inside the ovary and it will result in the formation of zygote. और इस process को कहते हैं fertilization. So let's look at the point. As soon as pollen grain lands on the stigma of the same flower, a pollen tube is developed. Okay, so this is pollen tube. And these were the pollen grains. Now this pollen tube will travel through the style and reach the ovary where it releases the male cells. In the ovary, the male cells will fuse with the female cell, leading to the fertilization and development of zygote. Lastly, after fertilization, ये जो ओवरी है जो बाहर पे प्रेजेंट था, ये डेवलप होगा इनटू फ्रूट. सपोज there is a formation of mango, so it will develop into fruit. Ovary will develop into fruit and ovule will develop into seed. Okay, so ovary will develop into fruit. So fruit is developed from ovary and seeds are developed from ovules. Next, let's move on to question 8. Describe the various ways by which seeds are dispersed. So there are many ways by which seeds are being dispersed, जैसे कि wind. So there are some seeds which are very light, जैसे कि drumstick and maple. They can be blown away by wind. Water. There are some seeds which are having the ability to float on water, like coconut and lotus seeds. Animals, बहुत सारे seeds जो होते हैं वो spiny in nature होते हैं या उनके पास हुक्स प्रेजेंट होते हैं जिससे वो एनिमल्स के बॉडी में चिपक जाते हैं. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल xanthium and urina. And lastly there are fruits which will burst. So ये जो fruits होते हैं वो burst करेंगे and as a result the seed will disperse far away. Like for example castor and balsam. Now let's move on to question 9. We have to match the column 1 with those in column 2. So first one is bird. So bird arises in yeast. Okay, outgrowth जो होते हैं yeast में, that is called as bird. Next is eyes. You will see potato have eyes. Next is fragmentation. So Spirogyra undergoes fragmentation. Wings. So who has wings over here? Maple has wings. Next are the spores. So bread mold, which is also called as fungi, they are going to reproduce through spores. Next, let's move on to question number 10. We have to take the correct answer. The reproductive part of the plant is the flower. Other parts, leaves, stems and roots, in सारे parts को हम कहते हैं vegetative part. And flower, it is the reproductive part. Flowers develop करते हैं fruits में. It is the reproductive part. Question B, the process of fusion of male and female gamete is called as fertilization. And जब ये male और female gamete fuse करते हैं, there is a formation of zygote. और इस process को कहते हैं fertilization. Next, question C, mature ovary forms the fruit. Okay, ovary बाहर होता है, fruit भी बाहर present है. That is the fruit. So ovary, as I have told you, it is the outer covering. Fruit is also present outside. It encloses the seed. वैसे ही ovary encloses the ovules. So ovary will develop into fruits. Ovules will develop into seeds. Next, a spore-forming organism is bread mold. Bread mold produce करते हैं spores and they will reproduce through spores. And lastly, biophyllum can reproduce by its leaves. So biophyllum के leaves के margins में there are presence of birds. जैसे ही ये birds fall करेंगे soil में, it will develop into new individual. So with this, we have come to the end of this chapter. So I hope you all have understood this chapter and marked the answers as well. So we are going to meet soon. Till then, everyone, do take care. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.